The first generation makes the money. The second generation manages it. Then, all too often, the third generation destroys it. Yes, in Gilded Age America, this cycle compressed into something far more spectacular, fortunes measured in the billions evaporating within decades, sometimes within years, occasionally within the span of a single lawsuit or stock market crash or spectacular binge that left entire family trees financially extinct. And these were not modest inheritances squandered by careless heirs. These were empires, transportation networks spanning continents, industrial operations that employed thousands, real estate holdings that encompassed city blocks. Indeed, the men who built them were ruthless, calculating, and utterly focused on accumulation. Their children and grandchildren had different priorities: pleasure, status, revenge, or in some cases, simply proving that wealth could not protect them from the particular madness that ran in their blood. Today, we chronicle Gilded Age dynasties who discovered that the hardest thing about inheriting billions is living long enough to spend them all, and that sometimes the real curse is succeeding. Imagine, if you will, stepping into a time machine, setting the coordinates for the heart of the Gilded Age, America's era of unprecedented industry and affluence that forged the most iconic old money families. And, amid the titans of the time, beyond the Rockefellers, Carnegies, Astors and Mellons, there looms a name that might surprise you: Gould. Indeed, Jay Gould, that infamous architect of fortunes whose audacious maneuvers in finance and railroads arguably gave us the phrase robber baron. But Gould's tale doesn't just end with that moniker. At the zenith of his power, he was a force so formidable that he came breathtakingly close to cornering the entire gold market, a feat so fantastical that it threatened to bring President Ulysses S. Grant to his knees. On today's episode, we become your tour guides into the opulent and infamous world of Jay Gould and his descendants. Through their eyes, you will witness the fierce battles for supremacy in business, the lavish lifestyles that only unimaginable wealth could afford, and the intricate strategies of power and influence that turned the wheels of the nation's progress, painting a vivid picture of an era where ambition knew no bounds and the quest for dominance was the ultimate game. Thus, their legacy, marked by extravagant multi-billion-dollar successes and spectacular falls from grace, offers a window into the tumultuous period that gave rise to America's wealthiest dynasties. As we describe the Goulds, the old money family that went from riches to rags and back again. Jay Gould, a titan of American railroads and a wizard of finance, stitched his name into the fabric of the late 19th century with a fortune so vast it's hard to wrap your head around it. Picture $71.2 billion in today's dollars, enough to make Midas blush. Therefore, Gould wasn't just rich. He was a cornerstone of America's transportation revolution, playing the market with the finesse of a seasoned gambler. And his empire wasn't confined to ledgers and stock certificates. Gould's penchant for splendor was nowhere more evident than in his choice of digs, with Lyndhurst Mansion being the jewel in his crown. Perched by the Hudson in Tarrytown, New York, this Gothic revival masterpiece, enveloped in its own 67-acre wonderland, was more than a home. It was a statement. Acquired in 1880, Lyndhurst was a canvas for Gould's grandeur, boasting turrets and designs that broke the mold of conventional architecture. Thus, his tenure at Lyndhurst, though marred by tuberculosis, was a time of opulence and refinement, evidenced by the treasures within Herter Brothers furniture, Tiffany windows, and paintings straight out of the Knoedler Gallery. After Gould's departure in 1892, Lyndhurst's legacy continued through his daughters, Helen and Anna, who infused it with their personal touches, modernizing and memorializing the estate. Now, a national historic landmark, Lyndhurst stands as a preserved slice of history, inviting us into the world of one of America's most intriguing magnates. But Gould's reach extended beyond the realms of real estate and railroads. His dominion over Western Union gave him the keys to the kingdom of information, allowing him to manipulate news flow and silence critics. Indeed, Gould's dance with politics was a delicate one, involving backroom dealings and, reportedly, the greasing of presidential palms. And Jay Gould's belief in the United States' economic future not only shaped his business maneuvers, but also etched a path for his descendants, weaving their way into the tapestry of global power and prestige. The marriages of his family members, notably Anna Gould's ties with European nobility through her marriages to Bonny de Castellane and then to Hélie de Talleyrand-Périgord, Duke of Saigon, mirrored the Gould family's societal elevation and their unbroken strand of influence. Not to be overshadowed, Helen Vivian Gould's union with John Graham Hope Delapour Horsley Beresford, a scion of British nobility, underscored the family's entrenched status among the world's elite, bridging continents and cultures. These days, the torch of the Gould legacy has been carried forward by their business ventures, particularly through Kingdon Gould III. A beacon of the family's legacy, Kingdon's forays into Washington, D.C. real estate, including the legendarily opulent Mayflower Hotel, highlight the Goulds' unyielding influence on the economic stage. However, needless to say, this family isn't exactly the household name that the Rockefellers or Mellons have continued to be. With that in mind, what exactly happened to this once $70 billion behemoth of a family that led them to fade into obscurity? To answer that, we'll have to turn over the proverbial page to the next chapter. The man who would come to be known in history as much for his infamy as his fame was born, Jason Gould, born on the 7th of May 1836 in Roxbury, New York. And regardless of his later controversial exploits, without a doubt the life of Jay Gould represents the classic rags to riches American ethos, as his journey began in a setting far removed from the bustling centers of finance and industry in a family of modest farmers in western New York. Now, John Burr Gould, Jay's father, balanced his life between farming and milling, participating actively in community development. And notably, he was the first male child of European descent born in Roxbury, remembered for his contributions to local education. Mary Moore, Jay's mother, brought to the family a heritage of Scottish settlers known for their strong religious convictions and perseverance. For this, Jay inherited from her a blend of religious fervour and a softer side that would occasionally manifest in his later business dealings. Despite their humble circumstances, Jay Gould's early life was supported by his parents' commitment to his education and development. This support enabled him to attend local schools and further his studies at Beechwood and Hobart seminaries, where he was exposed to classical languages. Undoubtedly, this educational background was somewhat exceptional for a farmer's son, suggesting his parents recognized and nurtured his potential beyond their agricultural setting. Growing up in Roxbury, Gould's early years revealed a sharp intellect and a natural inclination towards commerce, setting him apart from his peers. And the political and social upheavals of the time, particularly his father's involvement in the anti-rent movement, challenging the remnants of feudal land practices in New York, likely had a significant influence on Gould, fostering a sense of determination and the importance of securing one's interests. Then, the trajectory of Gould's career took a decisive turn with his initial foray into the business realm, starting in a blacksmith shop. And his business acumen quickly shone through, leading to an offer of partnership, which he later parlayed into a sale to his father. This early venture into commerce provided Gould with invaluable insights into the mechanics of business, laying the groundwork for his later exploits. Yet, perhaps most telling of Gould's early professional endeavors was his mastery of surveying, which he adeptly turned into a lucrative vocation. His surveying work across New York's southern counties, culminating in the publication of a history book at the age of 19, not only highlighted his expertise, but also his knack for leveraging his talents to full advantage. The young entrepreneur's skills in surveying came to the forefront when he taught himself the trade and turned it into a profession. As Gould's entrepreneurial spirit flourished, he ventured into the tanning industry in the 1850s. With the savings he had accumulated, Gould opened a tannery in Pennsylvania, aligning himself with Zadok Pratt, a veteran in the field with the experience of running the world's largest tannery at one time. And though their collaboration was brief, it proved to be a critical learning curve for Gould, enriching his business management acumen. The dissolution of this partnership led Gould to New York City, the pulsating heart of America's financial universe, where he dived into stock market speculation. His subsequent foray into Wall Street was in partnership with Charles Loop, a seasoned leather merchant. This venture, however, met a grim fate in the Panic of 1857, leaving Loop ruined and Gould's reputation tarnished. Yet, undaunted by these early challenges, Gould's resolve only strengthened. Convinced of the fortunes waiting to be made in New York City, he remained unshaken in his pursuit of success, as he would soon find his calling in a burgeoning industry of the time, the railroads. Jay Gould's foray into the railroad sector marked the beginning of what would evolve into a monumental chapter in his pursuit of wealth and influence. Starting in 1859, Gould dipped his toes into the waters of railroad stocks, laying the groundwork for a venture that would eventually crown him a titan of the industry. And his engagement in the railroad realm took on a more pronounced form during the tumultuous years of the American Civil War, a period ripe with economic disarray, yet brimming with opportunities for those shrewd and tenacious enough to seize them. By 1863, Gould had etched his name as a noteworthy figure in the business world through his management of the Rensselaer and Saratoga Railway. His adept handling of this venture paved the way for his acquisition and reformation of the Rutland and Washington Railway, further cementing his stature within the industry. Subsequently, Gould's ascendancy continued unabated, and by 1867 he had secured a director's seat at the Erie Railroad, setting the stage for one of his most audacious and notorious exploits. But Gould's tenure with the Erie Railroad was marked by brazen financial stratagems that would etch his name into the annals of American business law. The Erie Railroad War, a vehement struggle for dominion over the Erie Railroad, cast Gould into the spotlight as a formidable adversary. Alongside James Fisk, Gould engaged in a series of cunning maneuvers to thwart Cornelius Vanderbilt, deploying fraudulent stock issuances and manipulating legal and political avenues to diminish Vanderbilt's influence over the railroad. Indeed, this skirmish not only cemented Gould's repute as a financial sorcerer, but also highlighted his readiness to employ any means necessary to safeguard his ventures. Yet, it was Gould's venture into the gold market that truly exemplified his boldness and strategic finesse. The infamous Black Friday of 1869 saw Gould and Fisk concoct a plan to monopolize the gold market, driving up prices through accumulation and disinformation, all while betting against the likelihood of government intervention. Gould's audacity reached new heights as he sought insider knowledge from President Ulysses S. Grant's circle, aiming to stay one step ahead of federal actions. Despite their initial success, with gold prices skyrocketing, the government's decisive sale of significant gold reserves under Grant's directive caused the market to plummet, leading to widespread financial devastation. Gould, through cautious hedging, managed to sidestep personal catastrophe, but the debacle left an enduring stain on his legacy, showcasing the volatile nature of unbridled financial speculation. Thus, Gould's business endeavors, marked by a blend of brilliance and moral ambiguity, reveal a pattern of ambitious acquisitions and financial gambits. Through the Erie Railroad War, he demonstrated a relentless drive to manipulate systems to his benefit, a precursor to the bold tactics he would later employ. His attempt to corner the gold market underscored his penchant for risk and innovation, setting him apart from his peers. However, these ventures also painted Gould as a figure whose relentless quest for dominance often skirted the boundaries of ethics, leaving a complex legacy that intertwines ingenuity with controversy. Now, Jay Gould's ascendancy to the zenith of financial success culminated in an amassed fortune, estimated at a staggering $77 million, an amount that, in contemporary terms, translates to many billions, as mentioned in the beginning of this video. His financial dominion extended across various pivotal sectors of the American economy, most notably railroads, telegraphy, and even the media, with significant stakes in the Union Pacific Railroad, Western Union Telegraph Company, and ownership of the New York World newspaper. Yet, despite Gould's undeniable prowess in wealth accumulation and his substantial contributions to the American economic landscape, especially in the realms of railroad expansion and modernization, his name became synonymous with the pejorative moniker robber baron. This label, emblematic of the era's most ruthless capitalists, clung to Gould and his peers, who were perceived as exploiting labor, manipulating markets, and engaging in bribery to amass vast fortunes, often at the public's expense. However, no matter what our opinions of his tactics are, it is clear that Jay Gould emerged a very rich man, ready to pass a hefty legacy onto his children. In the next chapter, we'll find out whether they were able to keep the fortune growing, like the Rockefeller and Mellon descendants did, or if they would falter. George Jay Gould's entrance into the world on the 6th of February 1864 in New York City marked the assumed continuation of a legacy shaped by his father, Jay Gould. However, unlike the meticulously planned successions of today's old money scions, there was little indication that Jay Gould deliberately prepared George to inherit the empire. Yet, we're on solid footing to assume the environment George grew up in naturally inclined him towards the path tread by his father. Inheriting the reins in 1892, George took over a sprawling network that included the Missouri Pacific and Texas and Pacific railroads, among others. But George's tenure was marked by ambitious but ultimately unfulfilled visions, such as the creation of a transcontinental railroad system. This dream, grand in scope, was marred by a lack of concrete financial and operational planning, and his approach to expansion was fraught with strategic missteps, notably an aggressive push for growth without the necessary capital, which overstretched the empire's resources and hampered its competitiveness. Under George's watch, the Gould railroads grappled with outdated infrastructure and inefficiencies, lagging behind rivals that prioritized modernization and operational excellence. And his failure to adapt to the fast-evolving landscape of the American railroad industry, particularly evident in his handling of economic downturns like the Panic of 1907, further destabilized the empire. Therefore, unlike his father, whose knack for market manipulation and strategic acumen was legendary, George's decisions often reflected a lack of the same depth of insight, leaving the empire vulnerable to financial turmoil. Furthermore, George's laissez-faire management style contributed significantly to the decline of the Gould Empire. This approach led to strategic drift and operational neglect, allowing problems like corruption and maintenance issues to flourish unchecked, a stark departure from Jay Gould's tightly controlled empire. The resulting deterioration in service quality and customer trust further diminished the competitiveness of the Gould railroads. In other words, the cumulative effect of these strategic blunders was the loss of control over the family's railroad holdings, and the financial disarray brought on by George's leadership forced the Goulds to cede several key railroads, marking a dramatic fall from prominence in the American railroad industry. However, while George was bungling up the family fortune, the women of the Gould family were using a bit more tactful approach to the old money game through strategic marriages and working their way into the aristocracy. Anna Gould, born into the opulence and controversy surrounding her father, Jay Gould captured the public's imagination not solely through her inheritance, but also via her marriages to European aristocracy. In 1895, she entered into matrimony with Bonny de Castellane, a French nobleman emblematic of Old World title holders who sought to fortify their waning fortunes through alliances with New World wealth. Indeed, this marriage represented a quintessential Gilded Age transaction, merging the financial might of America's new money with the storied pedigrees of European nobility. And the union of Anna and Bonny was marked by opulence and public fascination, with their Parisian residence, the Palais Rose, standing as a testament to their extravagant lifestyle. However, the marriage deteriorated due to Bonny's prodigal spending habits and unfaithfulness, culminating in their divorce in 1906. Anna's subsequent marriage to another aristocrat, Élie de Talleyrand-Périgord, Duke of Sagan, in 1908, marked her second alliance with European nobility, further elevating her social stature despite initial familial reservations given Élie's relation to Bonny and his less illustrious paternity. Unlike her first marriage, Anna's union with Haley proved to be more harmonious and enduring. Next, Marjorie Gould, a niece of Anna, also navigated the marriage market to bolster the Gould family's societal position through her union with Anthony Joseph Drexel III in 1910. This alliance with the Drexel banking dynasty underscored the strategic matrimonial choices that fortified the Goulds' social standing in both American and European circles. And Helen Gould, another distinguished member of the Gould lineage, furthered the family's entrenchment in nobility through her marriage to John Graham Hope de la Poer Horsley Beresford, the 5th Baron Decies, in 1911. To provide a bit more context, these matrimonial strategies were emblematic of a broader phenomenon during the Gilded Age, where marriages between American heiresses and European nobles were orchestrated not just for love, but for the mutual benefits they offered: financial stability for the aristocracy and an entree into the elite social echelon for America's nouveau riche. The Gould family's forays into such unions thus mirrored the ambitions and societal aspirations of America's wealthiest clans, seeking to cement their legacy and prestige through connections that spanned the Atlantic, blending the rugged individualism of American enterprise with the ancient traditions of European aristocracy. In some ways, we could say these marriages also saved the Gould legacy, for from them birthed later generations of influential, if somewhat poorer, descendants in many fields across the world. The modern Gould family, with its roots deeply entrenched in the industrial and financial bedrock of American history, branched into various spheres of influence and achievement, from the cutthroat arenas of business established by Jay Gould to the refined realms of sport and public service navigated by his descendants. For example, Kingdon Gould Sr. and Jay Gould. The second exemplify the evolution of this dynastic tale, embodying the transition from the aggressive pursuit of wealth to the cultivation of genteel interests and public stewardship. Kingdon Gould Sr., born into privilege in 1887 in Manhattan, emerged as a figure who seamlessly blended the financial legacy of his lineage with a passion for the social and sporting life that defined American high society in the early 20th century. A product of the prestigious Columbia University, his education in engineering paved the way for his stewardship of the family's railroad interests and his valorous service during World War I. And beyond his professional endeavors, Kingdon Sr. was renowned for his prowess in polo, a sport that symbolized the leisure and competitive spirit of the elite. Furthermore, his marriage to Annunziata Camilla Maria Lucci broadened the familial and social connections of the Goulds, ensuring the legacy's continuation through their children, among them Kingdon Gould Jr., who we'll cover in a second. And Jay Gould II, Kingdon Sr.'s sibling, charted a path in another historically elite sport. His acclaim was garnered not in the boardrooms of industry, but on the court tennis fields, where his extraordinary skill earned him a championship reign that spanned over 2.5 decades, and even an Olympic gold medal. His triumphs in court tennis, starting from a precocious national title win at 17, attested to a dedication that paralleled the industrious spirit of his grandfather, albeit within the confines of sport rather than finance. Yet, the achievements of Jay Gould II in the sporting domain did not insulate him from personal trials, as his life was prematurely curtailed by illness, a poignant reminder of the vulnerabilities that lie beneath the surface of public success. The continuum of the Gould legacy was furthered by Kingdon Gould Jr., who transitioned from the familial heritage of financial and sporting accomplishment to a career defined by political and diplomatic service. His roles as ambassador to Luxembourg and the Netherlands were not merely diplomatic postings, but represented the Gould family's enduring influence within the tapestry of American public life. Kingdon Jr.'s diplomatic tenure, especially during the tumultuous period of Nixon's resignation, highlighted the adaptability that have characterized the Goulds across generations. The legacy persisted through Kingdon Gould III, who carved out a significant niche within the real estate development sector, particularly in the bustling environs of Washington, D.C. As a key figure in the Gould Property Company, founded by his father, Kingdon III steered the firm to prominence in the D.C. metropolitan landscape. His stewardship was marked by his role in spearheading projects like the Hyatt Regency Crystal City Hotel and the iconic Mayflower Hotel, both of which have left a lasting impact on the city's architectural and commercial development. Kingdon III's entrepreneurial vision was further manifested in the partnership with Boston Properties, culminating in the development of Market Square North. This project, completed in 1997, not only enhanced the Pennsylvania Avenue National Historic Site, but also exemplified his ability to blend historical preservation with modern development. Additionally, his strategic foresight in executing a land swap deal with the District of Columbia paved the way for the construction of the Washington Marriott Marquise. This hotel, serving as a central hub for the Walter E. Washington Convention Center, underscored Kingdon III's influential role in shaping the real estate and hospitality sectors in Washington, D.C., thus continuing the Gould legacy of impactful contributions across generations. Thus, the Gould family legacy, spanning from Jay Gould's notorious rise as a Gilded Age tycoon to his descendants' diverse pursuits in sports, diplomacy, real estate, and even European aristocracy, embodies the complexity of American success. While Jay's ruthless business tactics earned him wealth and infamy, his descendants diversified this legacy through contributions to sportsmanship, public service, and urban development, blending ambition with societal engagement, but also navigating the controversies inherited from their forebears' tumultuous career. The image of the eccentric billionaire haunts American culture. Titans who plaster their names across skylines, competing to build the most luxurious towers and go the farthest into space. Indeed, their wealth screams for attention. And yet, buried in Manhattan's tumultuous real estate history, lies a fortune that deliberately erased itself from public view. See, the Wendel family controlled an empire rivaling the Rockefellers themselves, but refused to announce their existence to the world around them. And while Vanderbilts hosted lavish galas and Carnegie's built libraries, this shadowy clan engineered a financial kingdom based on refusal. Refusing modernization, refusing visibility, refusing the very century they inhabited. Soon, the fortune that should have liberated them instead imprisoned them, warping their minds until wealth and madness became indistinguishable. Thus, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we unravel America's most psychologically disturbing dynasty, the billionaires who chose invisibility and paid for it with their sanity as we describe the Gilded Age family that went insane, the downfall of the Wendel dynasty. In the shadow of Manhattan's gleaming Art Deco spires stood an architectural anachronism that defied the relentless march of progress. The four-story brownstone at 442 Fifth Avenue remained frozen in the 1850s, while skyscrapers grew around it like crystalline forests. Gas lamps flickered in windows framed by iron bars, their amber glow a stubborn rebellion against Edison's electric grid that powered the surrounding metropolis. This was no ordinary mansion, but the fortress headquarters of New York's most confusing dynasty, the Wendels, whose wealth rivaled the Rockefellers, yet whose lifestyle belonged to another century altogether. The Wendel saga began with Johann Georg Wendel's immigration to New York around 1710, part of the Palatine migration that would seed America's economic aristocracy. By 1801, his descendant John G. Wendel I had established a thriving operation that capitalized on New York's strategic position as the nexus of the North American fur trade. The family's enterprise functioned within the triangular economics of colonial commerce. European manufacturers supplied trade goods to colonial merchants, who exchanged them with indigenous trappers for furs, which then shipped to European markets at profit margins exceeding 300%. When declining fur stocks in the Northeast and the rising popularity of silk hats eroded the trade's profitability in the 1830s, the Wendels executed a pivot that would ultimately create a fortune worth over $2 billion in today's currency. John G. Wendel I began acquiring Manhattan properties in the 1820s, focusing on undeveloped lots north of settled areas, with the prescient understanding that the island's constraints would inevitably push development northward. His investment strategy paralleled the frontier speculation model of the fur trade, identifying undervalued assets in territories positioned for explosive growth. Between 1790 and 1850, New York's population erupted from 33,000 to 696,000 souls, creating unprecedented demand for housing and commercial space. The completion of the Croton Aqueduct in 1845 solved Manhattan's freshwater crisis, enabling the dense urban development that would make the Wendels' strategic landholdings multiply in value exponentially each decade. In 1856, the family established their iconic mansion at 442 Fifth Avenue, constructed for $150,000, equivalent to $5.3 million today. This imposing red brick brownstone occupied a 100 by 100-foot plot at the corner of 39th Street, serving as both family residence and the symbolic command center of their expanding real estate empire. The 40-room structure would remain largely unchanged for 75 years, becoming increasingly incongruous as Manhattan's architectural landscape transformed around it. While the Vanderbilts erected palatial mansions and corporate interests built ever taller skyscrapers, the Wendels maintained their fortress with stubborn resistance to modernization. By 1910, it would be the last private residence in Midtown, surrounded by hotels and commercial buildings whose owners repeatedly offered millions for the prime location. When John G. Wendel I died in 1859, the family fortune stood at approximately $3 million, equivalent to $110 million today, primarily invested in 92% unimproved land and aging residential buildings. His passing triggered a succession crisis that would unleash his son's pathological need for control and transform 6 women into prisoners of their own inheritance. John G. Wendel II's appointment as executor in 1871 marked the beginning of a domestic regime that would subjugate his 6 sisters: Rebecca, Georgiana, Ella, Augusta, Josephine, and Mary, for decades to come. Unlike many Gilded Age patriarchs who wielded financial power through corporate boardrooms, Wendel engineered his control through an intimate architecture of familial imprisonment. His first maneuver exploited 19th-century coverture laws that treated married women's assets as their husband's property, forcing his sisters to sign legally dubious spinster agreements that would forfeit their inheritance rights upon marriage. The mansion at 442 Fifth Avenue became the physical manifestation of this control, with the sisters housed in shared bedrooms on upper floors while Wendel occupied the ground floor with direct street access, a spatial hierarchy that reinforced his dominance. To prevent external influences, he hired tutors to educate his sisters with curricula focused on property law and ledger keeping rather than liberal arts, creating a captive managerial class dependent on his approval. The psychological impact of this domestic tyranny manifested in the sisters' maladaptive behaviors, including Georgiana's documented hoarding of 412 moth-eaten dresses, none newer than 1870s fashions. Following their mother's death in 1872, the sisters wore only black bombazine, yet paradoxically spent $12,000 annually, equivalent to $360,000 today, on Brussels lace trim. Wendel enforced a financial lockdown that sequestered all tenant payments into trust accounts, requiring unanimous sibling consent for withdrawals, a structure later ruled illegal in the 1915 court case in re Wendel. His architectural containment strategy intensified after 1892 anarchist bombings near neighboring Astor properties, when he installed wrought iron window bars and constructed a 12-foot perimeter wall studded with iron spikes. The mansion stood defiantly against modernization, rejecting Edison's 1882 electrical grid connection purportedly to prevent sisters' exposure to degenerate media, like telephones. Despite receiving $2.3 million in annual rental income, household budgets capped food at $18 weekly, less than their doorman's salary. Wendel himself exhibited peculiar behaviors, wearing platform shoes with inch-thick soles to protect against disease entering through his feet, a detail that highlighted his paranoia. Rebecca Wendel, the eldest sister, staged the family's only successful rebellion at age 60, marrying Lutheran minister Luther Swope in 1903. Their correspondence reveals a startling duality. Rebecca publicly decried marriage as a bourgeois trap, while secretly amassing a trousseau over 3 decades. Swope's 1912 letter to Ella exposed the marriage's transactional nature. "Your sister required proof I'd renounce any claim to Wendel assets. I signed gladly, for love needs no ledger." Georgiana Wendel's psychological deterioration resulted in institutionalization at Bellevue Asylum in 1899 after she sued Wendel for $50,000 in withheld inheritance. Her case files diagnose hysterical neurosis stemming from prolonged emotional malnutrition, with treatment including forced embroidery sessions producing tapestries of Fifth Avenue properties. By the time John G. Wendel II died in 1914, his sisters had so thoroughly internalized their captivity that they continued the same lifestyle without rebellion. The 6 Wendel sisters, now aging spinsters in their 60s and 70s, maintained their Victorian dress and gaslit lifestyle, while the city around them embraced automobiles, electric appliances, and the dawning jazz age. Their collective decision to perpetuate their brothers' eccentric practices, rather than embrace freedom, revealed the profound psychological damage wrought by decades of control, a Stockholm syndrome that would manifest in their obsessive attachment to a succession of pedigreed poodles who received more care than their human tenants. As Manhattan entered the Roaring Twenties, the Wendel sisters' peculiar attachment to their poodles transcended ordinary pet ownership and became a displacement mechanism for their thwarted maternal instincts. Ella Wendel, who would become the last surviving sibling, lavished extraordinary attention on a succession of French poodles all named Toby, creating a canine dynasty that stood in stark contrast to the human lineage her brother had deliberately terminated. Each poodle received a jeweled collar worth $15,000, equivalent to $360,000 in today's currency, while the sisters themselves wore patched undergarments and refused modern conveniences. When a Toby died, the ritual mourning included a velvet-lined casket and formal burial in the Irvington Pet Cemetery, with meticulous succession planning that ensured the next Toby inherited the previous dog's royal accoutrements. The backyard of their Fifth Avenue mansion became known as the $1 Million Dog Run, a 2,500-square-foot urban oasis featuring a heated kennel with stained glass windows depicting ancestral Wendel estates. Developers repeatedly offered $1.5 million for this prime Manhattan real estate in 1927, but Ella refused, citing Toby XIV's constitutional needs as taking precedence over commercial opportunities. The sisters' summer residence in Irvington, New York, offered a parallel universe of eccentric behaviors, where they maintained Ayrshire cows despite documented lactose intolerance. Georgiana's diary notes, "Milk pours to troughs while we take tea." Their 50-room cottage contained its own contradictions. No telephone service until 1928, when fire marshals mandated emergency lines. Yet walls that, when X-rayed in 2001, revealed gold leaf beneath peeling wallpaper. For 7 decades, the Wendels locked their Fifth Avenue mansion each summer to live in Irvington, where they kept livestock and maintained a kitchen garden, manual labor that seemed incongruous with their wealth and urban reclusiveness. The family's 200 apple trees produced cider vinegar for cleaning, not consumption, with harvests reportedly left to rot ceremonially each autumn to feed the soil's humours. Irish immigrant labourers employed from 1870 through 1931 described the sisters hand-washing linens in the Hudson River for character building, despite their immense wealth. While the Wendels treated their poodles like royalty, the human residents of their approximately 150 Manhattan properties endured deplorable conditions that eventually attracted the attention of health authorities and housing reformers. The 1901 Tenement House Act inspections exposed the consequences of the family's no repairs policy, when investigators found 72% of Wendel rental units lacking ventilation or running water compared to 53% citywide. By 1910, tuberculosis rates in Wendel properties had reached 300% above Manhattan's average, creating a public health crisis directly attributable to their neglect. Buildings like 87 Orchard Street exemplified the decline. 1/3 of children born in Wendel tenements between 1905 and 1910 did not survive to age 5. The family's reputation transformed from merely eccentric to actively predatory through exposés like Upton Sinclair's 1927 piece, The House of Closed Shutters, which galvanized tenant unions against what he termed Wendel slumlords. When the last Toby died in 1933, his taxidermied remains sparked a legal battle between Drew University, a beneficiary of the Wendel estate, and the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, resolved by displaying him under glass in Mead Hall until a 1944 fire. The jarring contrast between the jewel-collared, pampered poodles and the suffering tenants became symbolic of the Wendels' twisted relationship with wealth. The capacity to provide comfort and security deployed selectively for canines while humans suffered. Ella Wendel's 1921 diary encapsulated this dissonance. Mr. Rockefeller's razing of the old Baptist tabernacle proves the transience of worldly things. This cognitive disconnect between accumulating vast wealth while living in calculated squalor would establish the groundwork for the family's ultimate economic downfall. An empire built on strategic neglect cannot indefinitely defy the forces of urban progress and regulatory reform. The Wendel family's investment philosophy crystallized under John G. Wendel II into what real estate historians would later term the Wendel Doctrine, a counterintuitive approach to wealth management that defied conventional capitalism. At its core lay four ironclad principles that transform neglect into a perversely effective business model. No mortgages, no sales, no repairs, and strategic uptown migration. The first commandment, purchasing all properties outright with cash reserves and avoiding interest payments, insulated the family from financial upheavals that devastated leveraged investors during the panics of 1873 and 1893. Their absolute prohibition on divestment created a compounding effect. As Manhattan land values appreciated at 7% annually from 1850 to 1900, allowing their portfolio to grow from 112 properties in 1900 to 150 by 1910. The most controversial aspect, minimal maintenance of buildings, reduced operating costs while exploiting New York's chronic housing shortage, which ensured tenant demand despite deteriorating conditions. This calculated neglect reached its nadir when buildings like the infamous tenement at 87 Orchard Street received only emergency repairs, creating what housing reformers dubbed vertical cholera farms in the immigrant-dense Lower East Side. Their uptown migration strategy, acquiring properties 10 blocks north of current premium zones every decade, positioned them to profit from Midtown's emergence as a business district in the 1910s. The family's crown jewel remained their Fifth Avenue mansion, occupying a 100 by 100-foot plot valued at $1.5 million in 1931, $30 million today. The property exemplified their philosophy of holding prime land while forgoing income maximization, a stance that became increasingly irrational as skyscrapers rose around them, including the Empire State Building completed in 1931. Their eccentric lifestyle choices functioned as visible manifestations of their business philosophy. The sisters, hanging patched undergarments on a rooftop clothesline, visible to the Waldorf Astoria's penthouse guests, served as performance art, declaring their rejection of consumer culture. Rebecca Wendel's Friday ritual of riding the 6th Avenue L to Washington Market to bargain for day-old bread while wearing a moth-eaten 1870s crinoline dramatized their contempt for the nouveau riche who flaunted consumption. Despite receiving $2.3 million yearly in rental income, the mansion's thermometers rarely rose above 55 degrees Fahrenheit in winter. Chill preserves virtue, John II had declared in 1895 correspondence. Ironically, this self-imposed austerity masked immense hidden wealth. Ella's 1907 ledger shows 12 cents spent on codfish versus $18,000 annually for poodle grooming. The Wendel approach created a self-reinforcing cycle. Rental income from downtown properties funded uptown acquisitions, while tax benefits from depreciating buildings offset rental revenues. Their 1905 battle against eminent domain for the Hudson Terminal project revealed the strategy's legal dimensions, spending $20,000, equivalent to $650,000 today, to retain a $75,000 property established precedents in land use law. However, this model contained inherent contradictions that became increasingly untenable as Manhattan modernized. Their resistance to transit development, evidenced by blocking interborough rapid transit subway access to 28th Street in 1904, reduced foot traffic to their garment district holdings, and sacrificed $12 million in potential retail income in today's value. The 1916 setback laws rendered their full-block buildings functionally obsolete, yet no retrofits occurred despite changing market demands. Their maintenance of 1850s-era fire policies without inflation riders led to $1.8 million in unrecovered losses in the aftermath of the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. By the 1920s, while competitors like the Astors embraced steel frame construction and electric elevators, the Wendels clung to outmoded building designs and amenities, with their unimproved lots becoming liabilities under new zoning regulations. The approach that had protected them from earlier financial panics left them vulnerable to a perfect storm of regulatory changes, market evolution, and taxation reforms that would threaten the very foundations of their peculiar empire. When Ella Wendel died on March 15, 1931, the last guardian of Manhattan's strangest dynasty left behind a vacuum that nature and the legal system rushed to fill with unprecedented ferocity. As the sole surviving sibling, Ella had reluctantly managed the family's 150 properties through the onset of the Great Depression, watching vacancy rates in their financial district buildings reach 45% by 1932. Her death unleashed what the New York Times called the most extraordinary inheritance battle in the city's history, a legal feeding frenzy involving 2,303 claimants to an estate valued at $100 million, equivalent to $2.1 billion today. The claimants ranged from alleged secret love children to distant cousins, each armed with elaborate genealogies, forged diaries, ancestral daguerreotypes, and dramatic testimonials about their connection to the Wendel bloodline. Among the more colorful pretenders was Martha Schroeder, who claimed to be the daughter of Wendell II's secret 1880s affair with a family maid, complete with documentation of an exile to Santa Monica under the alias Mrs. Holwedel, with a $5,000 annual stipend. The court proceedings revealed the existence of John Jr., purportedly hidden through elaborate protocols, including a craftsman bungalow with a secret basement apartment for Wendell II's visits. Claims later supported by genetic testing showing a 99.98% paternity match. The legal battle culminated in 1933 when surrogate James A. Foley approved a settlement granting over $2 million to 9 distant relatives, effectively acknowledging the legitimate branches of the family tree while dismissing thousands of spurious claims. Beyond the human drama, the estate faced an existential threat from tax authorities. The 1922 reforms had imposed 25% levies on undistributed trust income, forcing the first breach of the never sell dogma. The estate's tax bill necessitated the unthinkable, liquidating significant portions of the portfolio that had been accumulated over a century and preserved through the family's pathological resistance to divestment. This forced sale transformed Manhattan's physical landscape as Wendel properties became available for development after decades of artificial constraint, with parcels eventually incorporated into landmarks like Rockefeller Center and sites that would later host modern skyscrapers. The mansion at 442 Fifth Avenue, once valued at $1.5 million in 1931, was ultimately raised for a $4.2 million office tower developed by Drew University, one of the charitable beneficiaries of the estate. This redevelopment yielded a 58% annualized return by 1941, compared to the Wendels' historical 2.3% yield, a posthumous rebuke to their antiquated business model. The remaining estate was split among 5 charitable organizations, marking the final dissolution of a dynasty that had once controlled vast swaths of prime Manhattan real estate through a philosophy of deliberate inaction. The taxidermied remains of Toby XIV, the last in the line of pampered poodles, found their way to the Museum of the City of New York, a macabre memento of a family whose priorities had placed canine comfort above human welfare. The legal precedent established in the 1933 Matter of Wendel case continues to influence inheritance law, reportedly blocking 43% of contested claims in New York courts to this day. Architectural traces of the Wendel legacy have been almost completely erased from Manhattan's physical landscape. No plaques commemorate their holdings, no buildings bear their name, and few New Yorkers recognize the dynasty that once controlled their city block by block. What remains instead is a cautionary tale of wealth preservation taken to pathological extremes. The family that refused to build, improve, or adapt ultimately lost everything to the very forces of progress they had resisted. Their once imposing Fifth Avenue mansion, which famously lacked electricity while skyscrapers rose around it, became, ironically, a parking garage before its demolition. The ultimate symbol of a dynasty that refused to evolve and was subsequently paved over by modernity. The Wendels' resistance to change, embodied in gaslighting, Victorian dress, and primitive plumbing, proved no match for the inexorable forces of urban development, tax reform, and generational transition. In the final accounting, the empire that John G. Wendel II had preserved through psychological manipulation, architectural containment, and financial lockdown strategies disintegrated within 2 years of Ella's death, proving that fortunes built on stasis cannot withstand the hurricane forces of change in America's most dynamic city. While most videos about the Vanderbilt dynasty you'll find online focus on how much money they made, spent, and eventually lost, the real tragedy of America's richest family unfolded in secret. You see, the scandalous rise and fall of the Vanderbilt family is rarely ever told as it truly was, an epic downfall stemming from parenting failures that swung from brutal authoritarianism to neglectful indulgence, of children warped by wealth they never earned, and of a dynasty where money became both god and demon. Thus, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we share a one-of-a-kind analysis of how America's richest dynasty was doomed from its very inception, not by spending habits, but by the mental patterns established by its founder and amplified through each successive generation.
Cornelius Vanderbilt had what he called a mania for money. It's all he cared about. He didn't care about his family so much, he cared about the money. And that mania for money, that pathology, infected every subsequent generation in ways that it's just kind of fascinating to see how it kind of infected them.
Cornelius Vanderbilt's relationship with money bordered on madness. "I have been insane on the subject of money-making all my life," he once confessed, offering a rare glimpse into his self-awareness. This was no exaggeration from a successful businessman. It stood as the raw admission of a man whose identity had fused completely with wealth accumulation. Anderson Cooper, his great-great-great-grandson, assessed him bluntly. "I actually started out thinking maybe he was a psychopath." Cooper eventually concluded that money had become his sole reason for being. The Commodore's fixation transcended any desire for luxury or comfort. "I don't care half so much about making money as I do about making my point and coming out ahead," he declared, revealing that wealth served as his scoreboard in an endless competition. This psychological framework would later spread through the family dynasty like a virus. Born in Staten Island in 1794, Vanderbilt quit school at age 11 to work on his father's ferry. By 16, he had borrowed $100 from his mother to purchase his first boat. The seed of obsession had been planted early, a boy calculating profits while other children played. The human toll of this obsession proved devastating. He committed his wife to a mental asylum when she became an inconvenience. He sent his son, Cornelius Jeremiah, to the same institution, possibly because of his homosexuality. Every relationship bowed before his financial ambitions. As a father, the Commodore ruled with iron-fisted cruelty. He habitually demeaned his son, William Henry, labeling him a blockhead and a blatherskite, a person who speaks nonsense. This verbal assault cut so deep that William Henry suffered a nervous breakdown at age 19. Rather than offering support, the Commodore banished his son to manage a small family farm on Staten Island, effectively discarding the disappointment. His indifference extended to his 9 daughters, treating them as afterthoughts in his dynastic plans. The emotional damage extended beyond his children. Vanderbilt wielded his fortune as a weapon even after death, bequeathing 95% to William Henry, while the remaining 5% went to his other 10 children. Money functioned as his ultimate control mechanism, extending his tyranny beyond the grave. His business tactics matched his personal brutality. He crushed competitors without hesitation, treating business as warfare and accumulation as conquest. Starting with ferries, then steamships, and finally railroads, he consolidated transportation monopolies through manipulation and ruthlessness. Competitors often paid him substantial sums simply to operate elsewhere, monuments to the fear he inspired. His steamship monopolies earned him the title Commodore, a nickname that followed him even as he transitioned to railroad dominance. When challenged, he famously declared, "What do I care about the law? Ain't I got the power?" By his death in 1877, he had amassed approximately $105 million, making the Vanderbilts the wealthiest family on the planet. What the Commodore failed to anticipate was how his pathological relationship with money would transform across generations. The obsession with making money would gradually mutate into an equally destructive obsession with spending it. The ruthless focus that built the fortune would give way to an aimless, undisciplined approach that would ultimately destroy it. And the scars from his authoritarian parenting would ripple through the family line, creating generations of children traumatized by harshness or crippled by permissiveness. The Commodore's money pathology had begun its devastating journey through the Vanderbilt bloodline.
So the major question when it comes to the Vanderbilt Empire after the patriarch's death is, what did Billy Vanderbilt do with the money? And to his credit, Billy ended up doubling the money with time, carefully maintaining the Vanderbilt fortune through the opulence and performance of the Gilded Age.
William Henry Vanderbilt emerged from his father's shadow like a man climbing from darkness into blinding light. The man who would eventually double the staggering Vanderbilt fortune began his journey as the family's great disappointment. The Commodore's constant ridicule crushed him so thoroughly that at 19, his mind fractured, a nervous breakdown that would forever alter his relationship with both wealth and family. After his collapse, William Henry found himself exiled to a muddy patch of Staten Island farmland. Banished from his father's empire, he discovered an unexpected talent buried beneath the weight of paternal disapproval. The failing farm blossomed under his hand. More remarkably, the struggling Staten Island Railroad, a failing enterprise, transformed into a profitable venture through his unexpected business acumen. The Commodore, returning from a European tour in 1853, found his blockhead son had become something unforeseen, competent. This psychological resurrection from broken, dismissed heir to trusted successor came at a profound interior cost. Unlike his father, who worshipped at the altar of wealth, William Henry developed an almost superstitious fear of his own fortune. Massive wealth provided no advantages over moderate wealth, he would mutter like a man haunted by a curse. His fortune brought him nothing but anxiety, the complaint of a man drowning in golden waters. In a moment of startling clarity, William Henry once gazed at his neighbor's modest home and observed, "He isn't worth 100th part as much as I am, but he has more of the real pleasures of life than I have. His house is as comfortable as mine, even if it didn't cost so much. His team is about as good as mine. His opera box is next to mine. His health is better than mine, and he will probably outlive me, and he can trust his friends." The words hung in the air, a billionaire's confession of emptiness. This fundamental ambivalence coexisted strangely with ruthless business tactics. When questioned about discontinuing a popular express train, William Henry infamously declared, "The public be damned. I don't take any stock in this silly nonsense about working for anybody but our own." This psychological resurrection from broken, dismissed heir to trusted successor came at a profound interior cost. Unlike his father, who worshipped at the altar of wealth, William Henry developed an almost superstitious fear of his own fortune. When William Henry inherited his father's fortune in 1877, the scars of childhood emotional abuse shaped his approach to his own children. While the Commodore had been described as a mean man, never kindly or loving, like a dictator with his children, William Henry swung to the opposite extreme. He lavished his children with European travels and cultural experiences, taking his youngest son, George, on art collecting expeditions by the time the boy was 12. A painting titled "Going to the Opera," commissioned by William Henry, spoke volumes, depicting the family gathered in their mansion, older children dressed for the opera, servants hovering in the background. The image captured what he had craved as a child, family warmth wrapped in visible prosperity. Unlike the Commodore, who concentrated 95% of wealth in a single heir, William Henry dispersed his fortune widely. Each child received approximately $10 million, transforming them into what Arthur T. Vanderbilt II would later describe as a bunch of mini emperors not one showing any interest in making money or even keeping track of it, just spending it. William Henry's frail health cut short his reign at the pinnacle of American prosperity, and he resigned his railroad presidencies in 1883 due to chronic sickness. Just 2 years later, at age 64, he collapsed during a business meeting with Baltimore and Ohio Railroad President Robert Garrett. His death came merely 8 years after inheriting, fatally limiting his time to transmit financial discipline to his children. The psychological pendulum had swung from the Commodore's cruel authoritarian parenting to William Henry's indulgent permissiveness. The father who suffered from too little nurturing gave his children too much freedom. The man who endured harsh expectations imposed virtually none on his heirs. This unspoken psychological reaction against his own childhood would shape the dynasty's fate more profoundly than any business decision he ever made.
Mr. Vanderbilt has no fads or hobbies. He is a man of strong domestic tastes and finds his chief enjoyment in the family circle. The Times, 1893.
The Gilded Dynasty needed a golden child, and Cornelius Vanderbilt II fit the role perfectly. Heir to a business empire and bearer of his grandfather's name, he alone would navigate the treacherous waters between wealth's creation and its inevitable dissolution. Born in 1843 on Staten Island, he emerged as the favorite grandson of the fearsome Commodore and eldest son of William Henry. Unlike his father, who suffered beneath the Commodore's caustic criticism, young Cornelius received validation from the beginning. His work ethic, while clerking at the Shoe and Leather Bank in New York City, endeared him to his grandfather, the Commodore, who was a strong believer in personal industry. This early approval created a fundamentally different psychological foundation than his father's nervous breakdown and exile. While William Henry had scraped and clawed for his father's respect, Cornelius II inherited it. This psychological security manifested in a dual approach to wealth, maintaining his father's business acumen while developing an unprecedented philanthropy. He built two of America's most spectacular mansions, the Vanderbilt Chateau and the Breakers, but rarely had time to enjoy them. Instead, he made a habit of donating much of his income to various charitable causes. Yet beneath this veneer of success and generosity lurked a familiar Vanderbilt trait: authoritarian control. Cornelius II proved to be a hard-nosed man in his relations with his older children. When his son Cornelius III announced in 1896 that he wished to marry Grace Graham Wilson, Cornelius II refused permission. No reason was given. The patriarch's word was enough. When the young couple married anyway, Cornelius II responded with the ultimate weapon in a wealthy man's arsenal: disinheritance. The hard-nosed approach to his elder children contrasted sharply with his treatment of his youngest son, Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt, born in 1880. By Reginald's birth, Cornelius II had reached 37 years of age, established, secure, and increasingly indulgent. The family now occupied the pinnacle of New York society. Reginald grew up knowing only extreme privilege, never witnessing the striving that built the colossal fortune. Then came the turning point. In 1896, when Reginald was 16, Cornelius II suffered a stroke. This health crisis compelled him to reduce his active business involvement precisely during his youngest son's most formative years. The timing proved catastrophic for the family fortune. With his father's influence waning, Reginald's character development took a dangerous turn. The final blow fell on the 12th of September, 1899. Father Cornelius II died of a cerebral hemorrhage shortly after 6 a.m. at his home on West 57th Street in Manhattan. Reginald was only 19 years old, a critical juncture when financial discipline and business acumen should have been firmly instilled. Instead, the heir now had unfettered access to millions without the tempering guidance his forebears had received. Cornelius II left an estate valued at nearly $73 million, with $20 million in real estate alone. His older children, those shaped by his stricter parenting, largely maintained the family's business interests and philanthropic endeavors. But Reginald, the child of his father's declining years, followed a radically different path. While his brother Cornelius III wanted to make a contribution to society, Reginald abandoned Yale after 2 years to pursue horses and high living. The psychological journey across 3 generations had reached its pivotal moment. The founder's monomania for money-making had morphed into William Henry's ambivalent wealth expansion, then into Cornelius II's wealth management and philanthropy. Now in Reginald's hands, the fortune faced its greatest test. A young man with all the resources of a Vanderbilt, but none of the psychological foundation that had built the family empire. The pudgy figure in the roadster presented a startling spectacle to rural onlookers. Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt, heir to one of history's greatest fortunes, raced down country lanes with a bull terrier perched beside him, burning fuel as recklessly as he burned money. Born in 1880, as the youngest son of Cornelius II, Reginald emerged from a perfect storm of psychological vulnerability. His great-grandfather had died before his birth, his grandfather, William Henry, when he was merely 5. His father suffered a stroke when Reginald was 16, then died when the boy was 19. 3 generations of financial discipline had evaporated, leaving only wealth without wisdom. The consequences manifested immediately and spectacularly. On his 21st birthday, having gained access to an inheritance of $15.5 million, approximately $460 million in today's currency, Reginald celebrated by losing $70,000 at the gambling table in a single night. This staggering sum, equivalent to over $2 million today, disappeared without a moment's hesitation or remorse. Yale University suffered his indifferent attendance for 2 years before he abandoned education entirely. His profligacy knew no bounds. He commissioned solid gold nameplates for each of his 60 thoroughbred horses. He purchased hundreds of automobiles on pure whim. During one legendary evening at the roulette tables, he hemorrhaged $120,000, nearly $4 million in contemporary valuation. Over his lifetime, Reginald inherited $25 million, approximating $742 million today, all of which vanished through drink and gambling. By age 42, doctors delivered a stark prognosis: stop drinking or die. Reginald responded by marrying 17-year-old socialite Gloria Morgan. 3 years later, in 1925, cirrhosis of the liver claimed him at age 45. He left behind an 18-month-old daughter, also named Gloria, who would later achieve fame as a fashion designer. But the most shocking revelation came after his death. The heir to the greatest fortune in American history had died broke. He'd blasted through his entire fortune and incurred huge debts besides. Only a $5 million trust fund remained, to be divided between his young widow and infant daughter. This trust would soon fuel the infamous custody battle that newspapers dubbed the trial of the century. Reginald's spectacular financial collapse represented the culmination of a multi-generational psychological progression. Unlike the Commodore, who created wealth through savage determination, unlike William Henry, who maintained it through anxious discipline, unlike Cornelius II, who balanced it with philanthropy, Reginald knew only consumption. His development lacked critical psychological inputs. The stern guidance of an authoritarian father had vanished during his formative years. Where earlier generations received validation only after demonstrating competence, Reginald enjoyed approval without corresponding expectations. Without an authority figure imposing boundaries, in psychological terms, Reginald exhibited classic third-generation syndrome. Having neither created wealth himself nor witnessed its creation, he lacked both skills and motivation for preservation. The psychological trajectory of the Vanderbilt fortune had reached its inevitable conclusion. The obsessive accumulation had transformed fully into pathological spending, and the infant Gloria, born into collapsing splendor, would carry this psychological inheritance into the next generation.
The dynasty ended with heiress-turned-fashion designer Gloria Vanderbilt. After her death in 2019, her son Anderson Cooper sorted through troves of letters, documents, and journals, giving voice to the Vanderbilt ancestors he never knew.
The poor little rich girl never stood a chance. Gloria Vanderbilt entered the world on February 20th, 1924. Born into the wreckage of a once great fortune, her identity already a national obsession. At 18 months old, her father Reginald died from cirrhosis, leaving her half of a $5 million trust fund, the meager remnants of the Vanderbilt fortune. The real inheritance proved psychological rather than financial. At age 10, Gloria became the unwilling center of a custody battle dubbed the trial of the century by ravenous Depression-era newspapers. Her mother, Gloria Morgan Vanderbilt, and paternal aunt, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, battled for control of both the child and her trust fund. The courtroom became a theater of class warfare as Americans, mired in economic depression, devoured salacious details about the dysfunctional ultra-wealthy. After her aunt won custody, Gloria would later tell her son Anderson, "I had no relationship with her at all and just worshipped her from afar. I felt like an imposter." Gloria's relationship with wealth mirrored her fragmentary childhood, inconsistent, unstable, ultimately unreliable. Coming into her inheritance at 21, she embarked on a series of marriages and careers in art, acting, and eventually fashion design. In the 1970s, she launched her designer jeans line, her swan logo adorning millions of back pockets across America. At the height of success, she reportedly earned $10 million in royalties in 1980 alone. Yet the Commodore's pathology of money had morphed again. Gloria oscillated between making and losing fortunes. The 1980s brought catastrophe when Gloria discovered her lawyer had defrauded her of millions and failed to pay her taxes. The IRS placed a lien against her properties for $2.5 million. Forced to sell her homes, she faced financial ruin once more. Her son Anderson, born in 1967, watched this cycle with increasing wariness. By age 13, Cooper had begun working as a child model to earn his own money. "Work for me has been the thing which has gotten me through everything," he would later confess. Rather than resenting the absence of Vanderbilt wealth, Cooper embraced independence. "I don't believe in inheriting money," he declared, calling it an initiative sucker and a curse. He deliberately distanced himself from the Vanderbilt legacy, identifying as a Cooper, the surname of his father, who grew up poor in Mississippi. The final irony arrived in 2019 when Gloria died at 95. She left her son approximately $1.5 million, confirming that the Vanderbilt fortune had fully completed its evaporation. Yet something unexpected happened as Gloria's life concluded. Cooper, who had spent decades avoiding the Vanderbilt legacy, found himself drawn to understand it. In 2021, he co-authored Vanderbilt, The Rise and Fall of an American Dynasty with historian Catherine Howe. His purpose was not to glorify family wealth, but to examine how money had warped each generation that touched it. The great fortune had come full circle. What began as a pathological fixation on accumulating wealth had produced 5 generations later a man who found psychological freedom by rejecting wealth's grip entirely. Cooper's financial independence achieved what the Vanderbilt fortune never could: genuine self-worth. The final descendant had escaped the gravity of his great-great-great-grandfather's obsession, and in this liberation lay the most valuable inheritance. Imagine you are a multi-billionaire tycoon in the twilight of your life, standing before the vast empire you've built from the ground up. As you decide where to leave your fortune, you look into the eyes of your heirs, trying to discern who among them you trust enough to handle your life's work. Indeed, it would be a moment of profound introspection and decision-making, echoing the choices faced by industrial robber barons of the past. And one such magnate, Henry Clay Frick, confronted this very dilemma. His legacy, however, took a turn that many might not anticipate. In the cutthroat world of the steel industry, Frick's business practices earned him infamy. Yet, perhaps as a counterbalance to his ruthless pursuits, he also became known for his lavish spending on art and cultural artifacts. Turning their backs on the race to accumulate more wealth, the Frick children found their callings as scientists, professors, and artists, quietly choosing to let the mighty $3 billion Frick family fortune dwindle away, setting the name apart from old money families whose wealth seems to grow by the minute, like the Rockefellers and Mellons. In today's episode, we dive into the lessons learned from the Frick family fortune, the complexities of inheritance, and the nuances of old money as we describe the Frick family, when a $3 billion inheritance is given away. Henry Clay Frick, that titan of American industry and a maestro in the art of making bank, didn't just climb the ladder of the Industrial Revolution. He practically built a new one, planting himself firmly as the world's second richest man at his peak. And his wealth, painstakingly forged in the fires of the coke and steel industries, didn't just surpass the fortunes of mere mortals. It even outshone that of his mentor and partner in industrial alchemy, Andrew Carnegie. But Frick was no one-trick pony. His shrewd business sense, tireless dedication, and knack for spotting golden opportunities in coke and steel turned his ventures into the Midas touch of the era. H.C. Frick & Company wasn't just another player in the game, it was the game, fueling the furnaces of steel magnates like Carnegie himself. By joining forces with Carnegie in 1882, Frick entered the steel industry's major league and became its MVP, riding the wave of America's steel-fueled ascendancy. But let's not box Frick into the all-work and no-play category. The man had a flair for the finer things in life, a veritable connoisseur of the arts with a taste as refined as the finest aged wine. His New York City mansion was a temple to luxury, and a Beaux-Arts masterpiece that shouted opulence from every limestone block. Built between 1912 and 1914, this Fifth Avenue fortress was more than a dwelling. It was a vessel for Frick's monumental art collection, destined to become the Frick Collection Museum. And the mansion's interiors? Think of them as the velvet glove on the iron fist of industry, with 16 rooms that were less rooms and more sanctuaries for the soul. This was a home built not just to live in, but to exhibit a collection that would make any art lover weep with joy. The so-called living hall alone, virtually unchanged for over 76 years, is an icon of Frick's enduring vision of grandeur and grace. And what of the art? Frick didn't just collect paintings. He collected masterpieces from Rembrandt's enigmatic The Polish Rider to Goya's dynamic The Forge. His collection was a roll call of art history's VIPs, Bellini, Vermeer, Gainsborough, El Greco, each piece a badge of honor, each brushstroke a narrative of Frick's journey from steel magnate to patron saint of the arts. Today, the Frick collection stands not just as a museum, but as a cathedral to creativity, housing over 1,500 pieces that span centuries of European art. Thus, when Frick took his final bow in 1919, he didn't just leave behind a pile of cash. He left a treasure trove so immense it's hard to wrap your head around it. Imagine a fortune so vast that today it would be worth billions, a sum so eye-watering it underscores the monumental empire he built, brick by coke-fired brick. Clocking in at an estimated $145 million at his earthly departure, think a cool $2.9 billion today, Frick's fortune was the stuff of legends. Therefore, from humble origins to towering over the American Industrial Revolution, Frick's story wasn't just about making money, it was about making history. However, making the money for yourself is one thing, teaching your children, and then their children, requires an entirely different skill set. In order to learn exactly what happened to the mighty Frick fortune, let's roll back the gold-encrusted timepiece and start our journey in the rolling hills of rural Pennsylvania. Yet, as the story unfolded, it led to a pivotal moment that would shock both admirers and critics alike. In the early settlements of Pennsylvania, where opportunity beckoned the bold, the forebears of Henry Clay Frick made their mark. Originating from Swiss and German stock, these pioneers embodied the spirit of those seeking a fresh start in the New World. And their endeavors, primarily rooted in agriculture, contributed to the development of western Pennsylvania, setting a stage far removed from the future industrial exploits of their descendant. Indeed, John W. Frick, Henry's father, was no stranger to this agricultural life, but harbored ambitions that stretched beyond the confines of farm work. Born into a modest farming environment, John was a man who saw value in education and the promise of innovation, despite the family's financial limitations. And Elizabeth Overholt Frick, Henry's mother, brought to the family a legacy of industry from the Overholts, a family known in their locality for their work ethic and for making a mark in the distilling business. Elizabeth's influence imbued the family with a resilience and a strong sense of community, foundational values in the small town of West Overton, Pennsylvania, where Henry was born. Thus, the upbringing of Henry Clay Frick reflected these principles of hard work and community service. Born on the 19th of December 1849, as the eldest of 6 children, Henry's early life was framed by the simplicity of rural America, an existence marked by the labor of farming and the tight-knit community ties. And his education, starting in the local schools, revealed an early inclination towards business and a particular talent for numbers. Despite showing promise and a hunger for knowledge, financial pressures led to a pragmatic shift in Frick's path. Leaving Otterbein College to return home at 16, he began working as a clerk in a Pittsburgh mercantile firm, a decision dictated more by necessity than choice. This period of work outside the academic sphere offered Frick practical insights into the business world, an unplanned but invaluable continuation of his education. And these clerkship years were more than a stepping stone. They were a transformative period that allowed Frick to internalize the mechanics of business and the intricacies of the market. Therefore, this era in his life was instrumental in shaping his approach to business, fostering a meticulousness in financial matters and a strategic vision that could pinpoint and exploit nascent opportunities with precision. By 19, he had launched into his first venture into entrepreneurship, investing in a coke production operation. This bold move signaled the onset of an expansive business empire, and Frick's unyielding determination and keen business insight would soon propel him from the modest beginnings of rural Pennsylvania to towering heights in the industrial landscape. Henry Clay Frick's entry into the coke and steel sectors was a pivotal move that not only surged his wealth, but also solidified his position in American industrial history. And his strategic ventures in these industries were characterized by shrewd decisions and alliances, propelling him to a leading role in the Industrial Revolution. You see, the inception of Frick's journey into the coke business in the 1870s showcased his ability to identify and capitalize on emerging market trends. Coke, a critical fuel derived from coal for steel production, was growing in demand as the steel industry began to boom. Consequently, starting with a modest investment in a small coke operation, Frick's keen market insight and entrepreneurial spirit led to the rapid expansion of his enterprise, H.C. Frick and Company. And his efforts soon positioned him as the country's leading coke producer. Now, a defining moment in Frick's career was his partnership with Andrew Carnegie during the 1880s. Carnegie, a major figure in the steel industry, recognized the importance of having a stable coke supply for his mills. This partnership between Carnegie's steel manufacturing capabilities and Frick's coke production expertise was a powerful combination, enabling them to dominate the steel and coke markets. And Frick's role evolved significantly when he became chairman of Carnegie Brothers and Company in 1889, further tightening the integration between coke production and steel manufacturing. Now, this collaboration with Carnegie was crucial for Frick's financial success. As the steel industry flourished, driven by the expansion of railroads and the urbanization of America, Frick's wealth skyrocketed. His dominance over the coke supply chain provided him with a strategic edge and a lucrative slice of the industry's profits. Frick's influence extended further, with his contribution to the creation of the United States Steel Corporation in 1901. This amalgamation of steel and iron firms, including Carnegie Steel, into the world's first billion-dollar corporation, signaled a new chapter in industrial history. By the dawn of the 20th century, Frick had become one of the nation's richest individuals. His ventures into coke and steel, coupled with his alliance with Carnegie, yielded substantial returns, enabling him to diversify into real estate and finance. However, Frick's legacy is not without its controversies. His vehement stance against labor unions and his pivotal role in the Homestead Strike of 1892 underscore a darker aspect of his legacy. This confrontation at the Homestead Steel Works, which Frick managed on behalf of Andrew Carnegie, became one of the most notorious labor disputes in American history. And the decision to bring in private security agents from the Pinkerton Detective Agency to break the strike led to a violent clash, resulting in numerous fatalities and a wave of national condemnation. The incident not only spotlighted the harsh realities of labor conditions during the era, but also the extreme measures industrial magnates would employ to quash unionization efforts and maintain control over their workforce. Despite the shadow cast by such events, the impact of Henry Clay Frick on the industrial landscape of America is undeniable. His strategies, though often criticized for their ruthlessness, played a pivotal role in establishing a vast industrial empire. His legacy, though complex and controversial, underscores the multifaceted nature of industrial expansion and its far-reaching effects on American society and economy. However, his impact on his own children and descendants would be even more direct, which is what we'll investigate in the next chapter. Henry Clay Frick, indeed, left a legacy that extends far beyond his business achievements. Upon his passing in 1919, the division of his substantial estate revealed a clear preference for his daughter, Helen Clay Frick, who inherited the majority of his wealth. This decision highlighted her distinctive role within the Frick family and paved the way for her future endeavors in philanthropy and the arts, in sharp contrast to her siblings, who received significantly less. Now, many say Helen's inheritance was a deliberate recognition of her shared interests with her father, particularly in the realm of art. Entrusted with a considerable portion of his fortune, including his esteemed art collection and his New York residence, later transformed into the renowned Frick Collection Museum. This bequest appears to be a clear indication of Frick's trust in Helen's ability to further his cultural and philanthropic aspirations. However, the financial discrepancy in the inheritance was notable. Helen's share amounted to approximately $38 million, equivalent to over $400 million in today's currency, positioning her among the wealthiest women in America during that period. On the other hand, Frick's son, Childs Frick, received a lesser portion of the estate. Though still a considerable amount, it paled in comparison to what Helen received. Yet, nevertheless, Childs established his own legacy as a noted vertebrate paleontologist, contributing extensively to the American Museum of Natural History. Yet the repercussions of Frick's decision have had a lasting effect on his lineage. Helen's inheritance not only allowed her to enhance the Frick legacy through her philanthropic and cultural contributions, but also set a precedent for the subsequent generations. And her efforts laid the groundwork for her nephew, Henry Clay Frick II, and other descendants to pursue diverse interests and careers. Notably, Henry Clay Frick II became a distinguished physician and professor instead of a ruthless businessman like his grandfather, serving as chairman of the Department of Medicine at New York Hospital, Cornell Medical Center. Thus, his career, though distinct from the industrial and artistic spheres of his grandfather and aunt, was facilitated by the financial stability afforded by the Frick fortune, showcasing the varied paths Frick's descendants have taken, each shaped by the inheritance and the legacy left behind. However, it is certainly clear that the multi-billionaire lifestyle that Frick himself lived would not be the path of his later descendants, due in part to his personal dispensations of wealth. In order to better understand how that played and compare it to other old money families who kept and even increased their wealth, such as the Rockefellers and Mellons, let's jump to the next chapter. Now, Henry Clay Frick's approach to amassing and allocating his fortune was characterized by a pronounced emphasis on culture and philanthropy. His lavish expenditures, epitomized by his opulent New York City residence, now the esteemed Frick Collection Museum, and his vast art collection, underscored his profound appreciation for cultural and historical patrimony. And while these investments endowed his legacy with a rich cultural dimension, they did not enhance the financial inheritance bequeathed to his descendants in a direct manner. In a marked contrast, contemporaries such as the Rockefellers and Mellons opted for a diversified investment strategy, channeling their fortunes into ventures that assured enduring generational wealth. The Rockefellers, for example, significantly engaged in philanthropic endeavors through the establishment of perpetual entities like the Rockefeller Foundation. This strategy not only advanced public health initiatives, but also secured and augmented the family's wealth. Likewise, the Mellons' savvy investments across finance and industry sectors guaranteed a wealth expansion that benefited successive generations. The execution of Frick's estate further highlights the contrast in financial legacy management between his family and those of the Rockefellers or Mellons. Frick allocated a substantial portion of his estate to philanthropic causes, with the majority of his residual wealth inherited by his daughter, Helen Clay Frick. Though laudable, this philanthropic gesture did not facilitate wealth growth over time. Helen, inheriting a considerable fortune, prioritized arts and charity over investment strategies that could have furthered the family's financial base. And Frick's choice to bequeath the bulk of his estate to a singular heir, rather than distributing it among multiple descendants, concentrated the wealth but simultaneously curtailed its growth potential. Conversely, the Rockefellers and Mellons established trusts and foundations, mechanisms that not only safeguarded their wealth but enabled its financial proliferation across generations. Therefore, today, Henry Clay Frick's descendants, though comfortably affluent, do not figure among the echelons of modern billionaires. This status is the result of a series of factors deeply embedded in the family's ethos and historical decisions. And the Frick family's inclination towards privacy, coupled with an enduring commitment to philanthropy, has significantly influenced their financial standing and societal perception. Additionally, the Fricks have steered clear of venturing into large-scale business enterprises or adopting investment strategies aimed at significantly multiplying their wealth in today's economic climate. While they have managed their assets with competence, their approach has not been marked by the aggressive pursuit of capital growth, a strategy often employed by contemporary wealthy individuals and families to amass substantial fortunes. When you think of the Gilded Age, your mind conjures images of marble ballrooms and champagne fountains, of corseted ladies gliding across polished floors while gentlemen in tailcoats discuss railroad stocks. Indeed, it's a romanticized tableau of American aristocracy, refined, dignified, proper. But behind the velvet curtains of one $350 million Gilded Age fortune lurked a dynasty that shattered this pristine facade. You see, the Singer sewing machine empire wasn't just built on sewing machines, it was constructed from the contradictions of American capitalism itself. From a failed actor who revolutionized global industry but couldn't maintain a single household, to a lesbian princess who transformed modern music while hiding in a marriage of convenience. Then there's the family playboy who built America's playground for the ultra-wealthy, only to die penniless and forgotten, and their palatial European villas, which became Nazi headquarters while their global investments were seized by communists. In today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we won't be sharing the sanitized Gilded Age of period dramas. Here, prepare to enter the raw, unvarnished saga of how one of history's greatest fortunes vanished so completely that today's billionaires barely remember their cautionary tale. The sewing machine empire that clothed millions began with a failed actor who couldn't even stitch together a decent Hamlet. In 1811, baby Isaac Singer entered a world where every garment required 60 hours of hand stitching. Born to a German Jewish father who had cleverly amputated his surname Reisinger to Singer upon fleeing to America. Fate's first cruel stitch came when 8-year-old Isaac watched his mother Ruth pack her bags in 1821, divorcing his father and abandoning her son, the first in a lifetime of fractured attachments. The boy fled at 12 when his stepmother's regime became unbearable, escaping to Rochester, where his brother reluctantly taught him metalworking. Mechanical knowledge the theater-obsessed youth absorbed while dreaming of spotlights, not sewing machines. Isaac's quest for theatrical glory collapsed when critics mocked his wooden performances, though the touring life delivered a consolation prize in seamstress Mary Ann Sponsler, the first woman in a portfolio that would eventually include 5 partners and 24 children. When his acting troupe imploded in 1839, Singer found himself sleeping in repair shops across the Midwest, watching his dreams dissolve into desperate mechanical tinkering, rock bottom for a man who would soon rival Rockefeller in wealth. Salvation arrived in 1851 in a Boston repair shop when Singer encountered a clunky Lero and Blodgett machine that barely stitched without jamming. In 11 feverish days, he reimagined it with a vertical plunger, foot treadle, and tension mechanism. revolutionary changes unlocking 900 stitches per minute when competitors managed barely 40. The invention unleashed an industrial hurricane. Singer partnered with legal fox Edward Clark to neutralize patent challenges, pioneered installment plans and door-to-door demonstrations, and built factories across 3 continents, capturing 40% of global markets by 1860. At retirement in 1863, Singer commanded $13 million, roughly $350 million today, while his company held 22 patents and generated annual revenues exceeding $22 million. Staggering success for a man who once begged for repair work. Behind his triumph lurked a tangle of overlapping families that spawned decades of inheritance litigation, as Singer maintained multiple households simultaneously, creating a dynasty as complicated as his machine's internal mechanisms. The Needle's revenge was complete. The failed performer who couldn't sew together a theatrical career had stitched his name into industrial history while creating a family that couldn't stay stitched together. Isaac Singer's production line of children operated with greater efficiency than his sewing machine factories ever achieved. His first manufacturing attempt began at 19 when he married 15-year-old Catherine Maria Haley, quickly producing 2 children before abruptly shutting down that facility to join the Baltimore Strolling Players, discarding his teenage wife like a defective prototype. While still legally bound to Catherine, Singer unveiled a second production model in 1836, establishing a 25-year partnership with Mary Ann Sponsler that yielded 10 children. A shadow family maintained in increasingly luxurious settings as his mechanical inventions began generating serious capital. Quality control issues emerged when Mary Ann spotted her common-law husband parading down Fifth Avenue with factory employee Mary McGonigal, triggering a spectacular malfunction that culminated in Singer's arrest for bigamy and emergency evacuation to London in 1862. System diagnostics revealed a previously undisclosed production unit. A third wife, Mary Eastwood Walters, a company demonstrator who had produced a daughter in Lower Manhattan, creating a multi-branch family tree that would confound generations of probate lawyers. By 1860, Singer's human assembly line had manufactured 20 children, 16 still operational, by 4 different women, a biological output exceeding his patented mechanical inventions in both number and complexity. The 50-year-old industrialist's final manufacturing plant opened in Paris, connecting with 19-year-old Isabella Eugénie Boyer, who abandoned her husband to marry Singer in 1863 while already pregnant with the first of 6 additional children. This final production run yielded the Singer dynasty's most distinctive models. Winnaretta, the lesbian princess who revolutionized modern music, and Paris, the Playboy developer who transformed Palm Beach into America's most exclusive resort. Singer's 1863 will distributed his $13 million fortune with glaring favoritism. $500,000 to Isabella, $3 million to their children, modest trusts to 14 others, and an insulting $500 to son William, punished for supporting his mother during divorce proceedings. The subsequent legal battles began in 1877 when Mary Ann's children sued Isabella's heirs and continued into the 1920s. Decades of litigation consuming millions while providing the only genuine interaction between Singer's scattered offspring. When Singer's production line permanently shut down in 1875, his funeral featured 80 horse-drawn carriages and 2,000 mourners as workers lowered his body into Torquay Cemetery within 3 sequential coffins. The sewing machine magnate who specialized in connecting separate pieces died, leaving a family that would remain permanently disconnected, destined to unravel the fortune that might have bound them together. Of all Isaac Singer's offspring, daughter Winnaretta emerged as the most fascinatingly contradictory, an industrial heiress who championed avant-garde music, a princess who rejected men, and a millionaire who built housing for the poor. Born in 1865 to Isabella Boyer, Winnaretta absorbed the opulence of Oldway Mansion in England, developing a passion for cutting-edge music that would have bewildered her profit-minded father and a determination to live openly as a lesbian in an era when such preferences remained unmentionable in polite society. Her first concession to convention came at 22 when she married Prince Louis de Montbéliard, a union that imploded spectacularly on their wedding night when the bride reportedly scaled a bedroom armoire like a besieged fortress, brandishing a weapon and informing her groom that approaching her would result in his immediate dispatch to the afterlife. The Catholic Church graciously annulled this unconsummated disaster 5 years later, freeing Winnaretta to craft a more workable arrangement in 1893 when, at 28, she married 59-year-old Prince Edmond de Polignac, a gay composer seeking similar social camouflage, creating what Parisians called a mariage blanc, built on musical collaboration rather than bedroom compatibility. Now bearing the title Princesse de Polignac, Winnaretta transformed her Avenue Henri Martin mansion into a revolutionary musical incubator where Debussy, Ravel, Fauré and Chabrier premiered compositions that would reshape 20th century sound. The mechanical drone of her father's sewing machines replaced by the startling harmonies of musical modernism. The composer Ravel honored her patronage by dedicating his haunting Pavane pour une infante défunte to the princesse, while Marcel Proust soaked in the atmosphere of her legendary salon, later transmuting these experiences into passages of his monumental In Search of Lost Time. Throughout her marriage and after her husband's death, Winnaretta conducted affairs with numerous women without pretense of secrecy. Her lovers included painter Romaine Brooks, composer Ethel Smith, and novelist Violet Trefusis, creating occasional public scenes as when one spurned husband shouted outside her palazzo, "If you are half the man I think you are, you will come out here and fight me." After Prince Edmund's death, Winnaretta deployed her inheritance to commission groundbreaking works from Stravinsky, Satie, Milhaud, Poulenc, and Weill. Musical investments that yielded greater cultural dividends than any stock portfolio could have matched. Beyond music, Winnaretta defied expectations of self-indulgence by developing model housing for Paris's working poor in 1911 and collaborating with Le Corbusier on Salvation Army shelters for the homeless, progressive social projects that would have puzzled her ruthlessly capitalist father. During World War I, the princess partnered with Marie Curie to convert luxury limousines into mobile radiology units for treating wounded soldiers, while in the interwar period she funded the 360-bed Foch Hospital for middle-class workers, practical philanthropy that contrasted sharply with her half-brother Paris's pleasure palaces in Florida. The lesbian princess who had transformed sewing machine millions into musical revolution and social reform represented the singer fortune's most productive metamorphosis, industrial wealth transfigured into cultural and humanitarian achievement. Her carefully constructed world of artistic patronage and same-sex relationships seemed a fortress secure against conventional society's disapproval. But even princesses with millions couldn't withstand the coming storm of jackboots and swastikas. As fascism's shadow lengthened across Europe, no aristocratic title or family fortune could protect what Winnaretta had built. Paris singer, Isaac's 22nd child, translated his inheritance into architectural fantasies that transformed Florida's mosquito-infested coastline into America's playground for the ultra-wealthy. Born in his namesake city in 1867 to Isabella Boyer, Paris possessed his father's confidence without his work ethic, skipping out of Cambridge University without a degree. Academic failure that hardly mattered when $3 million inheritance dollars, $80 million today, awaited his 18th birthday. Standing 6'4" with what architect Addison Misner described as the finest-looking man I ever saw, straight as a die with a fine figure, Paris mechanically checked marriage off his to-do list by acquiring Australian-born Cecilia Lily Graham, who dutifully produced 5 children before discovering her husband's interests lay elsewhere. His defining passion emerged through a tempestuous affair with legendary dancer Isadora Duncan, whose revolutionary barefoot performances had scandalized conventional audiences and whose artistic vision Paris enthusiastically bankrolled, an investment in cultural disruption his industrialist father would have found bewildering. The relationship produced a son, Patrick, in 1910, only to collapse in tragedy when the 3-year-old boy drowned in 1913, a devastating loss that reportedly accelerated Duncan's psychological deterioration and terminated their romance. Paris's transformation from playboy to placemaker began in 1917 when he encountered architect Addison Misner, a fortuitous meeting that Misner later credited as the cause of my existence for the next 10 years, launching a partnership that would reshape American resort architecture. When Paris brought Misner to Palm Beach in 1918, the architect's first assignment was converting Singer's unremarkable villa into the exotic Chinese Villa, a project that demonstrated Misner's ability to conjure fantasy environments that wealthy Americans found irresistible. Their grandest collaboration emerged from Paris's desire to build a veterans' hospital, but with the war's end, the nearly completed facility was repurposed as the Everglades Club, immediately establishing itself as the epicenter of Palm Beach society and the blueprint for America's exclusive resort culture. As Everglades Club president, Paris resided in a custom apartment while developing increasingly ambitious plans for nearby Singer Island, including the Blue Heron Hotel, designed to be the most extravagant resort in North America and connected to the mainland by an aerial ferry with 12 cable cars suspended 136 feet above water. The Florida real estate collapse of 1926 shattered these dreams, forcing the Everglades Club into receivership as Paris found himself unable to service the massive loans he had secured using the club as collateral. Ultimate humiliation arrived in April 1928 when Palm Beach authorities arrested Singer at his own club on real estate fraud charges. And though a judge dismissed the case 3 weeks later, the public embarrassment so thoroughly destroyed his standing that he immediately fled the paradise he had created, never to return. The 1929 crash demolished what remained of his fortune, forcing the former social lion to spend his final years in a modest house in France with his wife and former nurse, Joan Balch. Dramatic come-down for a man who once commissioned buildings that defined American luxury. Paris Singer died in London in 1932, leaving behind the ultimate irony. The Everglades Club, Palm Beach society, and the Mediterranean revival style that defines Florida's Gold Coast, enduring monuments to a man who lost everything pursuing architectural immortality. As Palm Beach socialites sipped cocktails in the Misner-designed spaces Paris had bankrolled, the empire's creator died broke and forgotten, a cautionary tale written in stucco and red tile roofs. None of the scattered Singer heirs could have imagined that their family properties in Europe were about to face dangers far beyond mere bankruptcy. The 1929 market crash struck the first devastating blow to the Singer family fortune, transforming Paris's Mediterranean playground, the Hotel Carlton in Cannes, from champagne-soaked retreat to echoing mausoleum overnight. His Blue Heron Hotel, intended as America's most lavish resort, now loomed over Singer Island like an abandoned skeleton, silent testimony to ambition outrunning financial gravity until wrecking balls finally erased the embarrassment in 1940. For Princess Winnaretta in Paris, economic catastrophe threatened her musical patronage, though her aristocratic determination kept crucial social projects running. Her Salvation Army shelters continued housing the desperate, while her Foch Hospital treated middle-class patients even as bank failures multiplied. The Depression, however devastating, merely foreshadowed the existential threat approaching the Singer dynasty. Nazi jackboots that would trample not just their finances, but their physical legacy across Europe. When German forces occupied France, they systematically targeted properties owned by wealthy Jews, Americans, and aristocrats. The Singer family portfolio offering a perfect trifecta of confiscation targets. The Belle Époque Villa Nelcote in Villefranche-sur-Mer was commandeered as regional Gestapo headquarters, its elegant rooms repurposed for interrogations, while officers planned deportations from balconies overlooking the Mediterranean. In Paris, the Gestapo seized the Singer-Polignac mansion, auctioning portions of its priceless art collection. Musical scores, paintings and sculptures Winnaretta had spent decades assembling to fund the Nazi war machine. Singer trusts and investments in Germany vaporized under Aryanization policies, transferring generations of careful financial planning into Reich coffers with bureaucratic efficiency. Decades later, Keith Richards and Mick Jagger recording Exile on Main Site. At Villa Nelcote, discovered basement ventilation grills still bearing swastika insignia, lingering evidence of rooms where Nazi officers had once plotted atrocities. Meanwhile, in Russia, Singer's pre-revolutionary subsidiary had long since been nationalized, the family's eastern flank erased by communism, while its western holdings faced fascist expropriation. War's end brought little relief, as Singer heirs discovered their European trusts depleted, properties damaged, and art collections scattered, beginning futile decades-long quests through legal systems ill-equipped to deliver justice. The Nazi theft demonstrated how quickly the mightiest fortune could be erased when political forces turned against its owners, a vulnerability that even Isaac's mechanical genius couldn't have anticipated. What Hitler's forces had begun, the relentless mathematics of inheritance and taxation would complete. The post-war era delivered the coup de grace to whatever remained of the Singer fortune, as revenue-hungry tax authorities descended like financial vultures upon family trusts that war had already picked clean. IRS agents slapped liens on American-based Singer assets, forcing panic-stricken fire sales of properties that might have regenerated the family's wealth had they been held through post-war prosperity. Short-term government gain producing permanent dynastic loss. Meanwhile, the once mighty Singer Corporation watched helplessly as its global market share withered to 15% by 1963. Asian competitors using Isaac's own production innovations with lower labor costs to undercut the company he had built. Brand desperation manifested in licensing deals for products Isaac would never have recognized: kitchen toasters, furniture, hunting rifles. As the manufacturing colossus that once dominated global markets reduced itself to renting its famous name to anybody willing to write a check. By 1986, the corporate transformation was complete. Singer Corporation abandoned sewing machines entirely for aerospace and military technology, severing the final thread connecting the company to its founder's vision. Princess Winnaretta's cultural patronage proved more durable than her father's financial empire. The pre-Singer Polignac still recognizes musical achievement, while compositions she commissioned now form the standard repertoire of classical orchestras worldwide. In Palm Beach, Paris Singer's architectural vision endures through the Everglades Club and the Mediterranean revival style that defines Florida's Gold Coast. Though cocktail-sipping socialites remain blissfully unaware, they owe their playground to a man who died broke and forgotten. The Singer name achieved unlikely immortality in St. Petersburg, where the House of Singer survived Soviet nationalization to become one of the city's beloved bookstores, its distinctive glass globe still silently proclaiming Singer's global ambitions decades after the family's financial collapse. While Rockefellers, Vanderbilts, and other industrial dynasties preserved significant wealth through strategic diversification and political adaptation, the Singer fortune evaporated more completely. Scattered through poor investments, family feuds, geopolitical misfortune, and failure to evolve. Isaac Singer's 24 documented children scattered his DNA widely, but ultimately failed to preserve his fortune, producing hundreds of descendants who today live with little connection to the industrial empire that once bore their name. Today, vintage Singer sewing machines gather dust in attics across America, mechanical ghosts of a vanished empire whose name once ranked alongside Rockefeller and Carnegie, but whose fortune proved as fragile as the thread it helped sew.